Welcome to Democratic Television, a program of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party that brings insights, perspectives, and attitudes of our always thoughtful Democratic guests. Today we're joined by San Jose Council member Don Rocha. Don, thanks for being on Democratic Television.
Thanks for having me.
So you've been on the city council for a while. You worked for elected officials. You've had an interesting career so far, and fortunately for you, you're still a young man. So before we talk about the professional side, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school?
I went to, high school-wise, I went to Del Mar and Mitty. Split it up 2 years
Local
each.
guy.
Yep.
Okay.
And college, San Diego State, studied political science with a minor in philosophy.
Ah.
Absent those 3 to 4 years in San Diego, I was born in San Jose and lived my whole life in San Jose.
Oh, wow.
I'm a big fan of it. Don't plan on leaving.
Wow. A roots guy.
Yes.
So you are on the San Jose City Council. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty big deal. In fact, your council district is one of the largest in terms of turnout, and I think participation, a lot of responsibilities there. So going to school in high school or junior high, did you think, I can't wait to be on the San Jose City Council? Or?
No, the plan was law school, but after college and 4 years of books and studying and tuition and bills and part-time work, I was looking forward to a full-time job and was not interested in going to school a little bit longer. And even then, my interest really had never been elected office. I enjoy the policy work. So actually, the guy behind the scenes working for the elected official is my preference.
That's you.
Yeah. But
that was you.
And now, as the guy that's elected, it's a little bit different. But I just truly love the policy work and public service. It's really a passion of mine.
So if you had some of those ideas when you were younger, is there somebody that comes to mind? Many people think, well, if it weren't for John Kennedy, I would be driving a bulldozer.
No, there isn't really no one individual. My parents are both teachers, public school teachers. So really, if anything, it comes from them and serving the public. And really, it's not about salary at the end of the day for them. It was about the work they were doing. So I would look to them. And then, as you mentioned earlier, working for a number of different elected officials, I've had the opportunity to not just work for some, but to watch others as they work.
Yeah. And
learning from all of them and seeing what their focus is and their commitment to public service really has defined my approach now.
Okay, so after college, you came back to San Jose, and what was your first gig?
That's a great question, and I can't wait to answer that. My first job was hired by George Shirakawa Sr. He passed away prior to me graduating, so he made the offer like in January, February. So upon graduation in June, I was supposed to work for him. He passed away, unfortunately, so I worked for George Shirakawa Jr. was my first job at a college.
And he was a San Jose council member at the time?
Yes.
And the vice mayor, maybe not at that point?
Eventually, but not at that point,
Okay,
yes.
Okay. So what did you see about city government then that you thought, you know, I could go for this, besides being the behind-the-scenes guy?
Well, what I noticed, and it took a little bit of time to get to that realization, but I also had the opportunity to work for a couple of state assembly members. But appreciating working at the local level of government, the true impact you have on, say, your community or the city that you grew up in and love quite a bit, a true impact on, that intersection, that neighborhood, that park. That really was a big difference than working at the state level, where we were talking about projects or impacts that might have been in Northern California, far away from where I'm familiar, or in Southern California, where I have really no true roots.
Yeah.
So that's where the appreciation and the commitment to local government for me came about.
George's district was District 7,
yes,
which includes the fairgrounds and let's just say not the highest affluence in the city. You now represent District 9, which is working class. And can you describe District 9? What part of the city is it?
It's considered West San Jose. It's kind of west-south, in my opinion. But I call it suburbia, honestly. There's no real job centers. There's not any downtown particular area. There's not a high commercial concentration of a large shopping center where we're located. So it's truly just neighborhoods, parks, and schools, majority of it. And a lot of different folks. There's a lot of public employees that live in my area. There's a lot of high-tech folks. And it's really an interesting area. I'm blessed to represent it, honestly, because in terms of the point that you made about another district where there might be a higher need for an investment for city services, that doesn't exist in my district as much or at that level. So in a sense, I have the ability to get a little bit more engaged on the larger policy issues, as opposed to having to really get down into the neighborhoods and help particular groups or individuals because they're suffering from some particular shortfall on services, so to speak. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And so that kind of goes to your staffing roots. Part of what I know I've seen you do staffing is staff elected officials on boards and commissions, and yet also do constituency work when you get the phone call from somebody who's complaining about the proverbial lack of a stop sign. How do you develop an ability to, handle those things and to bring satisfaction to the callers?
Well, in the past, we would usually tackle that issue and fix that issue. I think it's pretty well documented, the budget shortfalls, not just in San Jose, but in a lot of different government levels. So it's not the same answer that it was in the past, and not as easy, unfortunately. So we've had to say, no, we can't help you quite often, and it's been frustrating, and that's been a difficult change for me from working previously in public service to now, is not being able to help or respond as we once were able to. And so it's been the biggest struggle I've had the last 3.5 years.
Actually, that's a very good point, because your service in government was when we were more flush, shall we say. There wasn't the downturn in the economy. The expectations were more easily met.
Yes.
So have that led you to have a better appreciation of how budgets come together and priorities and all that, because you have to, as you say no more?
Yes, I think the other side of it that's led me to feel is, I feel like the old guy in the council when I would say, in the good old days, we used to do this. In the good old days, we used to, and it's not the good old days anymore. So now I've got to readjust the whole paradigm on how we respond and how we prioritize our budget needs. So that's more really where it's come for me, is understanding what today offers and hopefully what the future can offer, and get back to providing some program enhancements and some service enhancements.
So a big part, as I said earlier about District 9, is it seems to be a very involved community. It may be not well defined by a 26-story tower or an interesting geographical feature, but neighborhoods play a big role. Had you been involved in neighborhoods, because obviously you live in District 9 as well as represent the district? Were the neighborhood organizations really active? And
well, comparatively to the other areas that I've worked in for other city council members, not as much. Generally, what I've noticed in my district is that there's a lot of organization more around involvement either in your children's school. As I mentioned, it's really truly suburbia. So it's either the schools or a particular sports league that their kids play in, or a particular park that they spend a lot of time in. And it's really more or less organized in the sense of involvement in those local level immediate issues that these folks live in every day. They're interested in going to community meetings and organizing neighborhood groups. Well, they're already at the Home and School Club meeting. They're already at their Little League game. They're already out at the field getting the grass ready for the soccer game. They're already involved in so many different ways, a majority of them, that adding that layer of, well, come out once a month on a Tuesday night and let's talk about this or that with our council member. The interest isn't that high, and that's just a generalization. There are some community groups that are very active, and I'm blessed to have those. But I think it's more of an involvement at the level that I talked about, and that's how I got involved in my particular area where I live now.
Well, your interest also began serving on a school board. And so you had an interest in education, maybe because you have kids of your own, and that led you to say, I want to play a role in how this whole system works. Was that a good experience? I mean, did you get like an eyeful from?
Well, yes and no. I mean, that's to the point about my particular district was about the schools and how I got involved in the community. It really wasn't about city government or a particular issue that the city wasn't meeting when I was interested in running for council. But my interest in the school board was, I have 3 children. I have a 14-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And at the time, my son was just moving into the school district and coming up through kindergarten, first, second grade. And we had had a couple experiences that weren't going quite well, at least a particular year. And the teachers approached me in the district. They knew I was involved in politics, and they said, we'd really like to have someone involved that's more of a parent, because right now we have some board members who, their kids are long gone from the school system. So they had encouraged me to run, and then given that recent experience I had, I thought it'd be a good opportunity for me to get involved more as the elected official as opposed to the behind-the-scene guy, which I had been for quite some time.
Yeah, but again, you weren't a stranger to how meetings ran, agendas, gavels.
No.
Yeah. What would you say to someone if they said, I really want to get involved and make education work? I mean, you chose to run for school board. Would you suggest that, or?
Well, I think starting at the Home and School Club, assuming you have children in the school district, is the best place to start. And from there, it goes to how I approach the issues of looking to see where the needs are. And if the need is a school board seat and your school board may be not engaged with the local community or maybe not hearing as parents or teachers, then absolutely. But there are so many different ways to be effective in education, even just as a parent in a home and school club or a volunteer in the classroom, outside of just being that elected official or school board member. But again, if there's a need there, then absolutely I would encourage anyone. We're trying to encourage some folks in the Cambridge School District again for some new candidates. So I'm kind of helping out in that area, going back to my old roots as a school board member.
Now, do you find yourself going into a classroom now and again and reading Dr. Seuss?
As in this job, I've been asked to read to kids. Just did it last week at the library, actually. And then I've been asked to speak to particular classes because a lot of the parents know me, and civics or history classes have asked, or government classes have asked me to come in and talk about the work I do and the impact of local government.
Well, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it's neat. I enjoy that a lot more than sitting at my desk or at the office in front of a computer. I'd much rather spend my time in the classroom.
Have you been in a classroom that your kids were in?
Yes. And it's been interesting, probably awkward for them. I could imagine being in their position, but for me, it's kind of neat. And I know a lot of these kids through the schools, and also I'm a volunteer coach. All the sports I've been involved in and helping out. So I know a lot of these kids and a lot of good kids. So I enjoy it a lot.
Great. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, Don Rocha, the coach.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Jerry McNerney. I'm the newest elected member of the United States Congress from Northern California. I represent the 11th Congressional District. I got involved in politics because my son encouraged me to do so. I'd never thought about doing that before in my life. And here I am now in Congress helping to change the direction of our country. If you would like to get involved in your country, we need you, we need your help, the community needs you. Please contact your local Democratic Party at 408-445-9500 and help make a difference. Thank you.
Welcome back to Democratic Television and our interview with San Jose Council member Don Rocha. Don, when we took a break, we weren't talking about you as a council member. We were about to talk about you as a coach. You said you coach all sports for the kids.
Yeah.
So what are your favorites? What are your least favorite? Tell me about bizarro parents that you've encountered.
My favorite is probably basketball. But I've done football, I've done baseball, softball, soccer. I've done all the major sports at least. But basketball is one of the ones I enjoy the most. It's fast moving. Kids are having a blast.
Yeah.
And with 10 kids on the team, you get to rotate them in as much as you can. So the way the league's set up, most of the kids get to play just about the same amount of time, and I really like that as opposed to having a bunch of kids on the bench that are trying to find time to fit in. This way, I think it's a better way to get the kids engaged, all of them.
Where were you 55 years ago when I was playing Little League? No, I think that is a much healthier attitude for kids. Their parents don't always appreciate it necessarily unless they're cool parents, which they damn well should be.
Parents are generally pretty darn good. Of course, you have the random ones here and there that have a strong opinion of what you should be doing or not be doing. And
right.
It comes with the territory. You get that in council too as well.
Well, I mean, but as a coach, you're all volunteers. You're there for the same reason, and develop the kids, and have a good time.
Yeah, I have been coaching for, my son is now 13, 14, so 6 years old, about 8, 9 years now I've been doing this. And
Wow.
oftentimes there's a number of parents that found out I was a council member by reading in the paper. They had no idea I'd coached their kid a whole season or 2 or 3 and never came up. We were focused on our kids and playing sports and having fun, and they never had a clue until seeing my name in the paper or my picture in the paper.
So you don't wear your Don Rocha council member
No.
blazer too often.
Don't introduce myself as that. No, not at all.
Yeah. Very cool. So you say that you really like policy. I mean, usually when you hear elected officials, or if I could use this term, politicians, they like to talk about their vision. This is where I see the city or the country in 10 years. But you mentioned to me earlier, that's really not you. You don't really like to have your head in the clouds.
No, I mean, we all have a vision of what we think would be a better San Jose or a better state of California or a better country. But again, you generally, after quite some time doing work, find what your sweet spot is or what your strength is. And mine is having an issue put in front of me, folks explaining what the issue is, and then asking for a solution. And then I am, for some reason, very adept at finding what that solution would be, not just in the application of fixing that problem, but also in maneuvering through the politics of it and the nuances of how to get to that end game. So I really enjoy that part of the job a lot more than being in front of the camera or on the dais talking about what my vision is, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I think for residents of a district where they don't have to have the council member there to harangue you on a regular basis, that's got to be a sign of success. That,
Yes.
like life is complicated as it is. Let's just get through the tough stuff and move forward. So, but you don't work alone. You have a staff of people. And so what do your staff people do while you're, presiding? You have a, chief of staff and other people. So what do they do? I guess they're the ones who probably take the calls from the constituents. And
Well, I've got 4 council assistants, as they're called, and an administrative assistant. And generally the council assistants, we've broken up the issue areas pretty evenly, and they're all working on different ones. Having my experience as a council assistant, what I didn't want to do was set up a system where one council assistant has to respond to all the constituent calls. While that may be an enjoyable job in some form or another, I don't think that's professional growth for an individual. So I've spread it equally that they're all working on particular issue areas and they all respond to constituent calls or particular issues within those issue areas. So it's pretty spread evenly, and for me it comes from my work as a council assistant and really wanting to grow as an individual, and I'm trying to help these individuals because these aren't lifetime positions. These folks won't stay in these jobs forever. There's really a lot of opportunities for them to move on to other positions, and I want to help foster that. I don't expect them to stay with me for all 4 years or 8 years because I want them to take any opportunity that may show them so they can grow professionally.
oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what's been the hardest issue for you to understand? Because you probably get things thrown at you all the time and you go, I have no idea what's behind nanotechnology. Now that probably might be your specialty.
No. Not that I want to bring up the term, but pension reform was probably the most difficult and in some form complex as well, talking about actuaries and accrual rates and projections about return on all of our investments. Delving down into that level of minutia on pension reform and what we should be addressing or not addressing was very difficult, complex, and in some form pretty frustrating.
Yeah, you didn't use the word contentious. I have to think that now you would.
Yeah, I would.
It seemed to me that the city was so divided over that issue, and not to relive the gory of all that, because Measure B passed, and now we're realizing the courts have stepped in, and retention becomes a complicated issue. Who can you entice to stay with the city, and who can you get to join the city because of the flight of some city workers, police, fire, and miscellaneous?
Yeah, there's a lot of different facets of that issue, prior and post, that we could talk about and go on and on and on. And I think the point you talked about, contentious, really was how we approached the issue, and that was probably one of the most difficult and frustrating parts for me. The analogy I use quite often is if your budget's tight and you're at home and you've got a family that you're taking care of, you don't go point at your kids and say, well, we're going to cut back because you eat too much, your clothes cost too much, we had to pay for your sports gear, it's your fault, so we're all cutting back, turn the lights off, and we're not eating as nicely as we have in the past. The other way to approach it is, we've got to tighten our belts, folks, and let's all figure out a way how we can do this together. That was not the approach we took in terms of the latter. We took the former approach of pointing at the problem and saying, that's the reason why, and we've got to fix it because of you. Some folks may not agree with that analogy, but I'm going to stand by that analogy, and that, I think, was our biggest mistake, because it really made the issue from the get-go contentious, is the word you used.
Yeah. Well, I know there's been many things blamed at the problem with pensions, including investment strategies, and for in a down economy, that makes it hard for the investments to grow over time. And again, a very complex issue that I'd almost rather talk about nanotechnology, take it the other way. So, of course, one of the issues that's come out of that is the whole question of crime. I think that's played a role in recent elections. It'll probably play a role in races in San Jose in 2014. People are afraid, I think. They're worried that, when they leave their home during the day, when they come back, they may have been ransacked. And so I imagine that that's something that you hear about. What's the solution? That's not a fair question. What do you think the city can do to try to get a handle on that and get back to the status of being a more safe, secure city?
There's a number of different ways to approach the issue. You've touched on a number of them. Retention. The famous term, or the term we use quite often, is attraction and retention. We need to be in a position, one, where we can fund more officers, but two, attract quality officers that we want to keep on the force and retain them. So being in a position to do that requires us to be able to pay them comparatively to other jurisdictions, and also provide a work environment that they'd want to stay and work in. And that points to the approach we took on our pension issue, as opposed to feeling like they're part of the problem. We want our employees to feel like they're part of the solution. And so there's a number of ways we can get this right. I'm hoping that this new cycle of elections for a number of council members in the mayor's race will bring in some folks that want to work together on the issue in a collaborative way. I know that term is overused quite often, but it hasn't been overused practically on this council for some time, and I think that would really change the dynamics a lot, because San Jose, the city of San Jose, used to be a place where folks would want to work at the end of the day. A lot of smaller cities around us, eventually some of those folks, as they get senior, would look to San Jose for professional growth, opportunity to work on bigger issues, whether you're in the public safety side or just in aviation or planning department. Right now, folks having an interest in coming to San Jose to work is pretty limited. So we're having a difficulty attracting folks, not just in the police department, as you've been talking about, but all departments, unfortunately.
Well, interesting to mention the planning department, because you really do want to know where you're going, and that is somewhat about vision, but it's also about what are the practical things you can do in a given area, and it's a pretty complex area.
Yeah, we are in the midst of trying to hire a planning director. We've got, it depends on what you quantify as a department, we've got somewhere around 13 or 14 departments. In 3 years, as a council member, every department head had left. We had one person that's still a department head that I've been there in just 3 short years. That's unheard of in the history of San Jose, as far as my experience.
Probably in most jurisdictions.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and it's had a big impact on the services we provided, not just on the funding levels of being able to have enough staff, but also the professional expertise at a department head, and having that vision that you talked about of what that department should be doing has really struggled. Parks and Rec is one that I'm very passionate about, just because I'm big on youth sports, and in the suburbia that I represent, parks and community centers are really a big focal point. Having the staff and the vision about what we want our Parks and Rec system to be again, I think has been compromised, and I'd really like to see an investment in that, should our budget turn around enough where we're able to invest again.
I'm sure we have a community that really does want to see the city come together, and I know one of the discussions you guys will have as a council is, should we put something on the ballot in November to generate more revenue? And I think while that will help, if it happens, give you a sense of people's confidence in the city council, it'll be a sense of people's confidence in the city too. And I think those are two different things.
Yes, I'm supportive of a sales tax increase. I think it'll allow us to make some small investment back in some of these programs that have been suffering significantly. Public safety would be one. Not just the issue that we've had with the reduction in our police force and the impact that's had on crime. Some other ancillary issues have had an impact as well, such as the medicinal marijuana collectives and their locations in residential areas. Some of the resulting factors of those are folks hanging out in front, using the medicine on the site, folks transient, I guess you could call homeless population, hanging out around those particular areas. And that in itself has been another issue that the residents, at least in my district, have talked about and some help with. So there's a number of different components of public safety, not just a particular crime that we're trying to address.
Yeah, complex. Well, Don, we have about a minute left. And so if somebody wants to get hold of you because they think you've done a great job or because they would fill in that needs to improve, I know you can take it. I think you're a modest person, but you're confident. How can someone get hold of you?
Well, I think the best way, as far as my campaign, I guess I'm running for re-election up here in June, is www.donaldrocha.com. That's a website. I'll have all the information on phone number, email address, and any particular interest that folks have in supporting the campaign or getting involved.
I assume that along with that will be your positions on issues and what you hope to accomplish and all that.
Yes, we have some of that actually left over from the previous election, and we're kind of modifying and update some of it to make it a little bit more newer and fresher. But a lot of it stands, honestly, in terms of where I felt the city has been and should be.
Yeah, great. Well, Don, thanks for being on Democratic Television.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching DTV. Give us a call at 408-445-9500 or visit our website, www.sccdp.org. Help make a difference, and we'll see you on the campaign trail.